Oh, there we go. I had to unmute everyone. All right, we should be able to hear you now. There you are. No?
Well, I know there was a comment saying that you couldn't hear us, so.
Uh-oh.
Brian, are you talking about me? I can hear you guys now.
Oh,
I
yeah,
couldn't
good.
before, but I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Yes, we're talking about you and to you.
Awesome.
So go ahead. It's your turn and your meeting. So looking forward to your presentation.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I think you guys were meeting and I couldn't hear what you were saying. Like I saw y'all talking to each other. So forgive me if there was a response or something I was supposed to do and I missed the cue. So first of all, thanks for allowing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just said you're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, thank you for allowing me to join you all virtually. As much as I would love to be there with you, there's a lot going on right now, so I appreciate the opportunity to do a virtual study session with you. So I'm going to go, I have a presentation, but really my hope was that we could have a discussion, you know, based on the prior call that we had and also some of the conversations and the emails and the material that Brian shared with me. It's clear that you guys have a lot going on. You have a lot of folks that are involved in economic development at the county level and locally within the two primary jurisdictions in the county. And so my hope was to one, help you set a foundation around what economic development is from a really big picture view, and then narrow it down to your specific role and maybe talk about some of the things that are important to you. Brian had shared a list of bullets with me of things you were interested in talking about specifically. So I promise we will get to those for sure. But first, I thought it would be nice if I could tell you guys a little bit about me and Khaled, and then I'd like to know a little bit about you all as well. So I'm going to share a few slides, and I'll do this on and off, where I'll share slides and then I will stop. So the first one, if you're not familiar with CalEd, we're the California Association for Local Economic Development. We have been around since 1980. We have over 850 members, and primarily those are jurisdictions. So it's city and county staff that are working to do economic development. Oftentimes when we're speaking to the staff or to city or county leadership, it's in this context where we're talking about what is economic development, what does it mean to your community? And for me, the most exciting piece of that is that when it comes to economic development, it doesn't really matter where you start. it matters that you move forward and you're having that conversation. And so I know that we've been to the county a couple of times over probably the last 10, 15 years. And it's just exciting to see that you all continue to engage in economic development. I haven't had the pleasure of being in your city to talk to you about it, but I have been there. I realized we had a conference in Monterey several years ago, and we drove through and we've taken time to go through the mission. It's gorgeous, and I can absolutely see why it's a tourist draw for you all. But I've been with CalEd 20 years now, more than 20 years, and 10 of those as CEO. So one thing you're going to hear me say is that I can monologue about economic development for 2 hours, no problem. But I don't know that you're going to get as much value as you would if we had a real discussion about what economic development looks like from your perspective as well. So some of the things that I'm hoping to cover today, and my apologies because I used as a base presentation, I just did a presentation for the city of Rancho Cucamonga. So some of these slides are slides that I borrowed from them. But my hope is to talk about the current environment, defining economic development and dispelling some myths, the role of your advisory committee in particular in the city, and the types of economic development and where to begin. Now, you all have already done a lot of work. And so when I say where to begin, I don't mean to imply that you haven't laid the groundwork, that you haven't. I saw the community survey you did in a couple of your reports. I know that you're moving forward, but when I say where to begin, it's in the context of, from what we've talked about today, what would you want to do next? And then measuring success. Another thing you're going to hear me say over and over again during the next hour, 2 hours is really going to be, what does success look like for you all? Because it's not the same in every community. We hear quite often from jurisdictions, especially from leadership in particular, what are metrics we should be using to figure out if our economic development staff are doing what they should be doing? And it's like, well, your metrics should be tied to your strategy, to your goals, your community vision, what you're trying to achieve. It's not necessarily the same as your neighboring community or similar community of your size. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And while I have Q&A at the end, I'm really hoping that you guys hop in and ask questions throughout. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And I was hoping that maybe you all, and I don't know how to do this because I don't have your individual names, if you could, one, tell me who you are, and two, tell me why economic development matters to you.
Okay, let's go ahead and start at that end of the room. We'll start with Darlene, please.
Okay, economic development means to me trying to create sustainability in our community so that we have ongoing economic development that sustains this community for a long-term period. I know we've been in a slump for quite a while, and there's a lot that we need to do. And yes, we are still working on things. So that's where I'm at.
Hi, my name is
Dina.
Dina. Thanks for joining Gearbox. Appreciate your presentation tonight. I'm a short-termer in the community. I've only been here 4 years, but I am from small town America originally. And I'm on this panel because I love the town and I'm committed to my neighbors and the community. And I want to make it the best that it can be.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Helena Walton, hello again. I'm a business owner and I'm a part of this because I want to make sure that we have policies and things in play so that the businesses can thrive, the community can thrive, and that we can work together on some level so that we can grow and bring prosperity to our area. So economic development is true to my heart because I've been working with grassroots nonprofits for most of my life. My family has been involved. And so with that, we're always paving a way. And I feel like economic development helps to pave the way.
Great, thank you. And nice to see you again too.
Hello, this is Stephanie Correa, and I'm kind of a unicorn. I was born and raised here, left when I was 18 years old, and came back 3 years ago after 45 years of being away. fourth generation, love this community very, very much. And I want our community to be the best version of itself. And we're very far from that. I remember when we did have a good situation, and I believe that we can accomplish that again. I do believe in change, but I think that we need to really look at what's going on, because it is a historic community and we need to keep that in mind, because without honoring our past, we're going to be like any other small town USA. And anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Fran Fitzharris here. I am Stephanie's a unicorn. I guess I'm a stray that decided to stick around in San Juan. I've been an active volunteer in the community for 6 years now, and I'm also a business owner that until recently had a storefront in downtown. And economic development is simple for me, and that is I want to be able to I want to keep businesses here. I want to attract other businesses to come here. I want to attract the many manufacturers and artisans that we have in our community that are making stellar products, but are deciding to go and sell them outside of this county or open businesses, storefronts outside of this county. I want to keep them here. And I want our community, our kids, especially the kids that come back from college, to have something to do and something to be proud of. So I think it's a combination of businesses, community, and also the right leadership. So thank you.
Thank you. I can't hear you. I'm not sure.
Okay, how about now? Oh, feedback.
Got it.
Hi, I'm Liz Sanchez Turner. I'm a community member for a little under 10 years. I'm a local small business owner, as well as I used to work for the city of San Juan Bautista, and now I'm working for the county, San Benito County. And I've always been a business proponent. I've always been an entrepreneur for as far as I can remember. And for me, what that means in a town like this is allowing the future growth of our community, having a place for those new kids that are coming up, and the small businesses that are here now, whether it's a retiree that isn't done yet and they wanted to start a business, or someone who is just living out their passion. I agree with Fran where we need the artisans and the craftspeople to stay here, to stay local and not want to go anywhere, and enrich our community. So I'm very much a proponent of that. I do believe in growth, but I also believe in keeping the uniqueness of our community and honoring the history. So there has to be a way where we can do all of that. And I'm very much a positive person. So I'm hoping that that's something that can come to fruition here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Patricia Baines, and it's good to see you again, dear. I think economic development is crucial to the growth and sustainability of any community. I have owned my own businesses, it seems like all my life, but it takes a lot of work, but it also takes community. And I believe that I've invested, my husband and I, in this community because we love it. And we've decided to put all of our eggs in one basket and try to make this a place for us to thrive and survive and succeed. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do to help us to get to that point where we are actually a viable business community, not just historic, but a viable business community as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have a couple of people who are in the audience who are members who are not really participating as members this evening. So we have a couple of people, and I think it might be appropriate to kind of open it up to anybody that wants to say something. Teresa is here. I know Leslie is here. And so if anybody has anything they'd like to add, that would be a good time. Go ahead, Teresa.
Okay, am I unmuted?
You are.
Okay, good, good. Oh, I just landed into Indiana today, so here I am at whatever time it is here. Economic development, San Juan Bautista. I grew up there. I left, like Steph said, I'm not a unicorn, but I think I'm a unicorn. I left at 18. I came back, and my biggest thing, and I don't want to say agenda, but I'm trying to create recreation, trying to create a healthy lifestyle for our community, the community members. We've got a lot of this group here that are downtown. They understand downtown. They understand the, what needs to be done with businesses. We got to fill those, all those empty buildings, but that's not where I thrive. I thrive in the recreation. I want to see things happen that create wellness in San Juan, and that's it. And good to see you again. I was at the seminar, the conference, and it was so much fun. Had a great
Good.
I would like to add something. Teresa's being very humble. She pretty much single-handedly got the tennis courts built down at the grammar school, and they have since been converted to pickleball courts. And I know she's very active, I believe, in the active transportation with the walking trails. So I just wanted to recognize that. Thank you. Yeah, and the school track as well. She's been fundraising for several years on that one. Thanks.
Nice. And then, Brian, did I hear you say that there was somebody else as well, or?
Yeah, I think she may pop up. She's in her car, so if she does, we'll bring her back in.
Okay. So thank you. Thanks for being vulnerable and sharing, what your passion is for economic development and your story. I'll tell you, it's really helpful for me to hear that, because as I'm going through the slides, hopefully what I can do is share information with you that's relevant to the things that really matter, that you've shared, that you care about. In a past life, before I worked for CalEd, I used to work for the California State Rural Health Association. So rural communities are important to me. And I've heard some of the challenges, especially on the healthcare side, when it comes to attracting good healthcare physicians, but also getting those facilities and some of the challenges, the economic development challenges that those smaller communities face. But oftentimes, and I hear it even now as I'm talking to small communities, there is this angst between, we want to grow, we want a future where our kids can stay here and thrive, but at the same time, we don't want to grow in a way that we lose our history. We don't want to lose what makes us special. So I certainly understand that. And I'll speak to that a little bit as we're going through the slide deck. So I'm going to go back to my sharing. So this is some of the information that Brian asked me to address, and I will discuss this, but I'm going to discuss it towards the end of the slide deck, because I want to talk about economic development more broadly, and in hopes that we have like the same foundation as we're having the conversation. So first, a little bit about the environment. Those of you that attended the conference heard me say it, and some of you were on the call that we had with the EDC last month, it seems, maybe longer ago, where we talked about the change in economic development in the environment. It used to be when you heard folks talking about economic development, it was about the practice of helping businesses thrive. But more and more what you're hearing, especially based on what we've seen in these last couple of years, it's not just the story of how does the economy thrive, how do businesses thrive. It's also what's the impact on people. You know, how does economic development really support creating a better quality of life? And that's a story that as economic developers, we haven't necessarily done the best job of telling. For example, some of you might be familiar with the financing tool redevelopment that was used to redevelop and clean up a lot of blighted sites in California. But what we would do is show a building that, you know, this is this block before redevelopment, this is the block after redevelopment, but it didn't necessarily tell the story of people. What's changed in our environment today is it's very difficult to talk about economic development without talking about the people it impacts. So you're going to hear me talk about that because it comes up a lot on the policy side, especially at the state level, and I suspect at the local level, although I know not all communities are touched by this, but you know, questions about has everybody been served in the community? Who's being left out? You know, are we being equitable? Are we really making a difference in helping all businesses and entrepreneurs thrive? What do our programs look like on our services? And are they having meaningful impact on the entire community? So that is a real change in how we talk about economic development. And so as I'm going through some of these slides, you'll hear me mention pieces of that. One thing that hasn't changed necessarily is the implementation of economic development, because there's tried and true strategies. And you're going to hear some of that as you were talking about, you know, wanting businesses to thrive or addressing empty storefronts or keeping manufacturers here in San Juan Bautista. There are tried and true strategies. So not everything is a recreation just because the language has changed. And you'll hear me talk about those tools and resources and what that looks like as well. And I think, and I saw this in so many of the pieces, Brian, that you sent me too, the need to be strategic, the need to be targeted. And so I know you're already having these conversations, but one thing that we emphasize over and over again, especially as we talk to local leadership, whether it's elected officials, volunteers, or appointees to committees such as this, is that, you know, it is important that you're strategic. You have limited resources, you have limited energy, and you might not get it perfect, but you should know what you want to change and the very specific metrics you're trying to move and have a targeted strategic strategy to do that. It's difficult, I would say, more difficult as a volunteer committee, because not only are you trying to affect change, you're also trying to, you know, work within the environment that you're given, whether it's at the city level, the county level, the regulations of the state. In some ways, you're probably more constrained, where in others, you can be more flexible. You probably say things that the city staff would love to say but can't say. You can say things that businesses want to say but might be afraid to. So you're an important liaison between the community, businesses, and government. So I'll get to that a little bit more, but the need to be strategic in the space is so key, and how you as a committee carve out your very specific role. I did see, I can't remember what document it was, where you there was a discussion about the committee and how potentially, you know, committee members had done more than what they were tasked for. And it absolutely speaks to the excitement and the energy that you all bring to the table, but how to harness that in a way that everybody's moving in the same direction so it is strategic. That's a challenge for you all. And I'm hoping that as I talk about economic development and the city county role, that helps you get some clarity as well. So it's a kind of a muddled environment right now for us as we see this change happening. And again, I know some of it's impacting you all and some of it might not be. So this is the definition of economic development that we've used. And it's not a, you know, we've gone through a difficult time and now we've changed the definition. This definition stands the test of time. I mean, we've been talking with elected officials and leaders about economic development for more than 40 years. not me personally. Me personally would be more like 15 years, but economic development is the creation of wealth through which community benefits are realized. So if you think about that, that's a really broad definition. It's the creation of wealth through which community benefits are realized. So it's not just supporting business for the sake of supporting business. It's not just creating wealth for the sake of creating more wealth, whether it's for local government, for individuals, or for the state. It really is the intention that if your businesses are thriving, your people are thriving, your coffers are thriving, and thereby you're providing really important services to your members so the community as a whole is thriving. It is about the quality of life. We can't leave that last piece out, the community benefits piece, because that's the whole reason we do any of this, right? To make sure that we have a quality of life that aligns with the vision and values of our communities. So broad definition, I'm going to bring it in really tight to what I see in the work and the information that Brian provided me as well. So let me talk to you a little bit about economic development myths. And just so you know, you guys can hop in at any time. It sounds really quiet to me, and it might be because you all have your stuff on mute, but hop in if you have questions or comments to add here. Another issue, and this isn't necessarily a sign of the times, these are issues that have always been issues when we talk about economic development. You know, there is this myth out there that economic development is only about jobs. It's not about jobs. That might be one metric, and it's a very specific metric based on what you're trying to accomplish. But if your role in the community is to create jobs, and I didn't see that necessarily clearly called out as a role of the committee, one of the challenges you'd have almost immediately would be is how do you say that you've created a job unless you've actually done the hiring of that position? The thinking has always been that if you have good policies, you've created an environment where businesses can thrive, those businesses will need to hire because they're growing and because there is an opportunity for them to bring more people on board. It's a byproduct of good economic development, but it's not the only metric of good economic development. It's important to remember that. And sometimes it's about keeping the jobs that you have. If you think about the Great Recession of 2009, even if you think about what happened during the pandemic shutdowns, if the only measure of success for you was how many jobs you're creating, that would be a very difficult story to tell in those environments. So that's a myth, a very persistent one that stays out there. We hear a lot, especially with state electeds and national federal elected officials as well. The next item focused on attraction, primarily retail, you know, chasing big box stores, whether it's Sam's Club, Costco, or Walmart, a host of others. There is this perception that all economic development is about attracting new businesses. I think one of the most common things that we hear are communities that are focused on, we need to get a Trader Joe's, or we need to get a Nordstrom, or whatever that, pardon? I think somebody said something, but I didn't catch it. Okay, so I'm going to keep going. So it's more than attraction of retail. There's also a myth that economic development is a pro-business lobby. It's not. It's about the economy. It's bigger than pro-business, because you can be for the economy and not necessarily for every business that's thriving within the economy. And that's important to make that distinction. It is the challenge, just candidly, that chambers, I think, have when they're doing economic development or tasked with economic development. As a chamber, you might be the advocate for your business community. So, you know, you're the one that's going to the city or county saying, you know, this needs to change so our businesses can thrive. But the city or county might say, that's not part of our strategic plan. That's not an area that we're investing in. And so we're not focused on that. So, it is important to know that economic development is not a pro-business lobby, but it is about helping businesses thrive, businesses that align with the community values and the vision that you all have for what you want your future to look like and what you want your community to look like. The next couple I'm going to hit really quickly: connection to workforce, housing, and specific industries. We see this a lot, especially now, whenever there's last year when there was a lot of money at the table during the state's budget session, you would have heard folks fighting for resources, basically saying, the economy is an issue. You've got to invest in this because if you invest in this, it spurs economic development. And you had specific industry sectors with that argument. You have housing with that argument. You have workforce with the argument, and they're all important component pieces to economic development. But by themselves, they're not the individual necessarily determinant of whether your economic development strategy is going to be successful. And the final myth that economic development is not connected to people and place. And you heard me say it earlier, and you even in your own comments as you're talking about what you want your community to look like, what's important to the people of San Juan Bautista. If an economic development strategy isn't connected to people and place, then I'm not sure what the value of that strategy is. And I think I know most practitioners absolutely understand that. But as you get away from the practitioner to potentially, whether it's policymakers or folks that are advocating or lobbying for different issues, this gets muddled. But economic development is absolutely, it has to be rooted in what's important to your community. So those are some myths about economic development that we see in today's environment. It's important for you all to be aware of those as well. And I'm going to switch a little bit to start talking about roles, the different roles, groups, and people play in economic development. Before I get to that, does anybody have any comments around the content that I've covered so far or any observations you'd like to share? And I can stop sharing if you'd like.
No, carry on, please. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let me move this down so I can keep a little bit ahead of myself here. So when we talk about different roles groups play in economic development, we think about what the community does. Local economic development should translate the community's vision into reality. I think it's really important that you guys did a community survey. I saw that in one of the pieces again that Brian shared. Again, it's got to be connected to people and place. So the community is vitally important in whatever work you're doing as it relates to economic development. Elected officials need to be the champions of that work and make those investments because that can't always come from the community. At the end of the day, the local elected officials that are leading have the ability not just to make investment decisions, but to also shape and champion the strategy that you all are working on that's going to help you get to what the community looks like in 5 years, in 10 years. You might even have a 15-year vision of what you want San Juan Bautista to look like. But elected officials are critical in championing that cause and helping everybody stay on track, making sure those investments are in place to continue that work. Business is critical. One thing that we've seen happen during the SURF process, I think some of you are familiar with the Community Economic Resilience Fund at the state level, where it's millions of dollars dedicated. First round is for strategic planning, strategic economic development planning. And then the next round is for implementation of economic development projects. Interestingly enough, some of these roundtables aren't including business at the table. To me, I don't know, again, how you have an economic development strategy or a way to be effective if you don't have your business partners at the table, the critical voices. So, and they're part of the fabric of your community. I heard so many of you say, I'm a business owner, or I've been a business owner. You're not just, a business person that's trying to get money from the community, selling a good or service. You're part of the fabric of the community and you care, and it shows in the time you've dedicated to the committee as well. So businesses, again, a critical partner in economic development. And then government, of course, oftentimes government is tasked with the broader work of economic development, whereas the committee might have a very specific role. At the end of the day, the city has a much broader role in making sure the entire community thrives. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the next few slides. But to me, one thing that stood out, especially in the resolution, your formation, and again, some of the documents Brian shared, is that you guys are critical in not just being the voice of business, you're the voice of the community. You're there, you're bridging the gap between those groups. And then you're also empowered not just to make recommendations, to also do some of that work. So as a committee, even though your role is kind of tightly defined in your organizing documents, you also have a lot of freedom probably to do more than what's tightly defined in there. And I think that that's a blessing and a curse, right? You can take on as much as you have the energy for and as little as you want. So again, being strategic here for you all as a committee is really important. So I'm going to continue to go through roles until somebody stops me. So I saw this as one of the critical things that you all are charged with, to stimulate the provision of enhanced resources for local business development and support, establish and maintain communication with city staff and city council regarding business support, development, and overall economic development, and establish, maintain an ongoing liaison with economic development resources in San Benito County and state and federal agencies. Each one of those bullets is a big thing. It's not within each one. I know you have 3 subcommittees as well. That's a lot of work for a volunteer committee. And I would imagine, and maybe I'm projecting here, it seems like it'd be very difficult to take these big pieces and say, this is what we want to accomplish as it relates to this bullet point. This is what we want to do as it relates to this bullet point and to this one. I know you all have done some of that work in the subcommittees that you have, but I would just say, as you're looking at this, again, be mindful of the time, energy, and resources that are available to you, because you don't want to burn yourselves out either. It's getting really focused on, what does success look like? In 2 or 3 years, when you're done with your role on the committee, or maybe you're still active on the committee, what do you want to look back and point to and say, we did this? And it should be very concrete. Again, these are very broad, and it gives you so much leeway to have that conversation about, this is the very specific thing that we want to do, so we can say that we succeeded in this year or in the past few years. So your role is broad, but you are the liaison. You're very important and critical. I'm going to talk a little bit about the city's role. This is important because you remember I mentioned that very broad definition of the creation of wealth through which community benefits are realized. There's a reason that the majority of our members are cities and counties. You know, it is the responsibility of government to provide an environment where residents can thrive. So from a public perspective, local economic development is about the allocation of your limited resources. From the city perspective, whether that's land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, in a way that has a positive level of a positive effect on the level of business activity, employment, income distribution patterns, and fiscal solvency. This might seem way more formal of a definition of what economic development for local government looks like, but this is a piece that gets shared widely with city governments. And as a volunteer committee, if you haven't seen this before, it's good for you to have in your mind that this is something that local government staff talk about on a regular basis in terms of what their role in economic development looks like. Where are they making these investments? So hopefully, as you're bringing back good recommendations based on the work that you're doing, you know, they're thinking of it from a bigger lens of everything they need to accomplish to serve the community and where they're going to make their investments. And Brian, if you want to hop in on this piece in particular, please do, because I have a few more sides on the city public sector role. So the next few slides in particular are ones that I use to talk to elected officials about, because it is really, it's challenging for electeds to get focused as well. If you haven't been in a city county position, if you haven't done economic development before, making the connection between what might have been I support business. I think it's important to be innovative. I think it's important for us to have more jobs where people can earn more and we can serve everyone and they can thrive. Taking those big messaging points and narrowing them down to what can the public sector do is really critical for electeds in particular, but also city and county staff to understand. So from the public sector's perspective, maintaining and increasing and diversifying the tax base is critical to serving your members, or excuse me, not your members, your residents in the cities. Increasing revenues faster than the cost of municipal services increase. This isn't just, the cost of electricity or the cost of maintaining public facilities. It's also the cost of maintaining good staff. We are seeing this challenge in the city level in particular, possibly counties as well, where We thought we were going to see, I think they were calling it the silver tsunami back around 2008, 2009. The Great Recession changed a lot of that, but now we are seeing a lot of retirement. So you're seeing experienced staff within local governments retiring or moving on to other positions. So it's getting harder and harder for some communities to be competitive in maintaining their workforce. So having a strong economic development program, so you have the revenue to make sure you have the right workforce within the city or county itself, is important as well. Also, the public sector's role to make sure that there's economic vitality for retail, commercial, and industrial areas. I was really glad to hear you mention manufacturing, because a lot of communities don't talk about the importance of manufacturing, and it is absolutely still a path for people to make it to the middle class, especially if you have not had formal education beyond maybe junior college, possibly even beyond high school. Manufacturing is still thriving in California, and to the extent that our communities can embrace it and embrace it in a way that supports your local community objectives is really important. Maximizing property through highest and best use. I saw that you guys have a, I believe it's in your vision statement, I could be wrong, but it's important for you to have that buffer space around the city, right? That untouched, preserved space where people can really enjoy the, I say enjoy nature, but I don't think that's the exact language that you all use, but making sure that if the city or county own land, that they're using it in the best possible way to serve their residents. That doesn't mean putting a car dealership on every corner so you can get as much money as you can. It really is like, what is the best use of this property? Understanding that not just from an economic standpoint, but also the standpoint of what your community wants. Maximizing property, we already talked about that. Create and retain jobs, increase per capita income. Well, you can't get away from it in economic development, but it shouldn't be your sole measure or reason for doing economic development. Creating economic opportunities for residents, important for the public sector to have a role in it. You hear it over and over again as you're hearing some of the initiatives at the federal level for investment. Generating revenue to pay for programs and investing in community development. For example, infrastructure. I don't know if you all have this challenge, but it was a significant challenge for a lot of our rural communities and around wastewater, how to deal with it, updating sewer systems, updating different infrastructure pieces that the city or county might be responsible. It is important to have a strong economic development program, again, so you're generating that revenue so you can provide the services your residents want. I have 2 more slides on this. Sorry, I know I'm going really deep into it, but I want to make sure that, you know, I've shared this so that we all have the same understanding. Brian, is there anything you want to share before I keep going?
Yeah, just I think it's important too to understand that, but part of the public sector role, I think, is to, especially with a new economic development program like we have, and by new I mean, you know, it's a year old, and I think in the world of economic development, that's relatively new. And I don't think the city had much redevelopment experience prior to the end of that overall program in the state. But one of the important things, I think, for a new program for the public sector role is to create that space and to create that context within which a strategy can be developed and people can communicate around, you know, their shared vision for what economic development means here. So, you know, I think that previously, maybe there hasn't really been an opportunity for people to participate in that context. And so I think that that's an important public sector role, I think. And then that is a dynamic process. So as the committee begins to learn about what economic development is, understands what the concepts are and what the levers are to increase, to achieve community benefits, you know, that role changes over time. So maybe what my role was this past year, what Dawn's role might have been, and what our relationship between the members here and the city council, that's all going to change over time. So it's not necessarily a static sort of thing. So And I think the committee understands that. We've had a lot of conversations recently about what roles should be, and that's something that we're going to explore coming up pretty soon, I think.
Right. I think somebody put their hand up. I can't tell. Does somebody else have anything they wanted to share as well? No? Okay. And I'm going to keep going. And Brian, I think you're absolutely right. Your point about how roles change over time, especially in this scenario where you have a strong volunteer group that is so engaged. I mean, as the city makes the investment to create that space, as you called it, for participation, what that participation looks like is going to change as you guys get more information and more work under your wings, under your belt, as it were. So excellent point. Public sector role. So continuing a little bit through here, it is to create certainty and foster a business friendly environment to influence business investment and location decisions. You know, that piece about empty storefronts, and it's not just empty storefronts, it's how do you bring businesses and private employers or even public sector employers for that into your community without having made investments that make people want to be there. I think one of the questions that came up is, can you talk about how vital or how important it is to make investments in streetscapes and making sure that the infrastructure is there? I mean, thinking about it from a business perspective, and many of you are business owners, I'm sure that you weigh these decisions with there's a business case. It's not just, oh, I like the city, I don't care if they can't provide the services I want, I'm going to be there. There's some critical things you need in order to feel valued and feel like your business can thrive. So it is important that the public sector role include creating certainty and fostering a business-friendly environment. And there's different ways to do that, and you see some of those on here. Let me see what I've done here. And so I always include more slides than I go into detail on. So I will give you this slide deck. This piece is a little bit repetitive from some of the items that we've already spoken about. So I'm going to skip through this a little bit. I will keep this slide up though, just talk about self-sufficiency. I heard, I think at least one or two of you talk about a time where San Juan Bautista was thriving and doing well and isn't now, or might not be as much as you all want it to. And so it's really important from your perspectives to engage more and help bring that vibrancy back to the community, to the economy. Some of the other things that are important for economic development are really creating self-sufficiency. You know, making sure public services would be less dependent on intergovernmental transfers. And so that we saw that so much during the pandemic, where we had communities that were in dire needs of CARES Act money or ARPA funds to make sure that they could make it through some of the most difficult shutdown times, especially if you're heavily reliant on tourism. So your economic development strategy, if done right, should mean that you're self-sufficient, that you can, you know, if faced with a business interruption or economic interruption, you have the ability to sustain your economy and continue for a certain period of time. Productive use of property, we talked about that, and economic diversification. So again, you'll see these slides, and if you want me to go back into detail on any of these items, I can, but in concept, we've talked about all of them so far. And I'm going to close this section by just saying, again, this is about the quality of life that we're creating for the residents. And it is not just about the creation of wealth. It's not just about supporting business for the sake of supporting business. I think that's really important. And I heard several of you say it, so I know that you get it. But we don't always have people that talk about economic development that understand that the tie is to people and place. It's not just wealth generation for the sake of wealth generation. So making sure that you are creating the future that you want. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So that specific list that Brian shared with me, that's the next piece I wanted to cover. And I have some thoughts on it. But before I go deep into those, are there any things that you guys want to talk about? Anything that surprised you or you thought is contrary to your understanding or your beliefs around economic development that you want to explore a little bit? there anything that's missing?
No, actually, outside of what you were discussing, kind of like where my mind has been going, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Is the educational part, because, you know, 5 of us attended the meeting so that we could get a deeper understanding into what we're trying to accomplish here in our city. And we took away a lot of information. I mean, we were soaking it up as a sponge, but now we're trying to put it all in perspective, you know, not overdoing it. Like you said, not running ourselves into the ground, but being strategic about our approach. And one of the things that we've already done is we're in partnership contract with California Main Street, which is going to help us put together that strategic plan that we need. But one thing different, and because they deal with the communities of historic attributes, so small communities like ours. But one of the things that I was looking at with Cal Ed is that there's resources that I saw, at least in my Google search, that is offered through the Cal Ed platform that may be able to assist us. I saw that there was like funding opportunities in our educational or trainings or certifications that would help individuals in our position to take a deeper dive, so we have a better level-headed understanding, so we can better promote and deal with what's coming down the pipeline. My goal for myself in being on this part of this committee and being part of economic development for the city is to just stop reacting to things and start creating things for others to react to, so that we have a better defining process on what's going on. And I want to know, with your experience, for other communities of our size, or it could be smaller or a little bit bigger, how do we approach that? What would be the best way? Because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a best possible approach from where we are, what we're trying to do. How do we get to a place where we can be more functional, if you will?
And I'm gonna
If
thank you.
understood all
Thank
of that.
you. Yeah, no, I captured it. I got you. So I'm going to talk about when we get to these next couple of slides, I'll talk about where to begin, some thoughts on how to narrow it down and get really close to what you want, and to make sure the resources that you are looking for are available to support the very specific things that you're trying to accomplish. So I'll come back to that piece. The training and education piece, I'll say, and that's going to be based on you all individually, right? Some of you might want to become a certified economic developer. You might want to go deep into the curriculum and understand how projects get financed, how to create a capital stack, how to do site assembly. You might be interested in those, and we certainly offer that kind of training. Where I have found the most value for committees like this, and especially in a small community, and in situations when you have, you know, just a couple of folks, or maybe your community is so small you only have 1 or 2 people working on economic development, or part-time person that is also like the police chief, an economic developer, or mayor, fire chief, an economic developer, being able to talk to your colleagues that are in the same space. So we have what we call a rural exchange, specifically focused on smaller communities. Now, we allow communities to self-designate if they believe they're rural or not. But I will tell you, there are a lot of smaller communities that are engaged. And the whole purpose of that is to, one, bring to you resources that you otherwise would not be familiar with. So we'll have the EDA representative, we'll have the head of USDA, we'll have the state team there. And I know that you've been active with GoBiz, so you know some of those folks. You will have the leaders from SURF there, so they can talk to you specifically about their focus on rural communities, what resources they have available. But I think more importantly than just getting past that resource piece, we make sure that you have time with your colleagues where you guys are talking about what are the issues that are impacting my community. And I think that you will find there are a lot of communities in that group that probably have some of the same challenges and opportunities that you all see, but they also have solutions. So it's a great chance to network with other folks that have either been through it or are going through it. It's a really rich environment, and we try to keep those rural exchange meetings as inexpensive as we can. We have one coming up in September, and it's $50 a person to attend. If you'd like, I can send you the agenda. It's going to be in Ukiah, so I think that's a bit of a drive for you all, but hopefully it's not too much of a drive to deter you. I'll send you the agenda so you can get a sense of it. But again, we bring a laundry list of resources to the table because we know that it's difficult for all of them to make it to the rural communities. It's difficult for you all to take the time to connect with them. But then you can also talk to other communities. The focus for this one is also going to be downtown and tourism. So that might interest you as well. The city of Ukiah is going to talk about what they're doing in that space. The state staff that are, or this, excuse me, the state tourism consultant that's joining us is going to talk about their creation of regional tourism strategies and what they're doing in each of the regions that they've identified. Again, this is an important resource that I think you guys would want to be tapped into. At least make sure San Juan Bautista is listed and thought of as they're putting that strategy together. I think, Teresa, you just raised your hand. Am I wrong?
Unmute. Just curious, what are the dates of the of this rural exchange?
It's just one day. It's September 14th. So you probably for sure want to come up the night of the 13th. You spend the day the 14th. It closes with a networking session. We're going to do a walking tour of the downtown where they talk about what they've done in different areas, how they've invested, challenges and opportunities. And we should be done by, I think, probably 3:30, 4 o'clock that day. So if you want to hit the road after that, you can. But the 14th, September 14th is the day of that. And Brian, I'll share with you the agenda if you, and I think you actually had attached it in one of the emails that you had attached. Yes.
Yeah, the committee has the information. So, but we're our challenge is to make sure we have enough budget established for people to attend conferences. We have made money available, so I think that people could just let me know if they're interested. I plan on attending. So.
Oh, great, good. I think Teresa has her hand up again as well. Teresa, I can't hear you if you're talking.
Okay, just saying that if someone has the time and the want, maybe we don't need to use city monies for this. It's you know, I think more of a passion and an interest for a lot of us.
Probably the heavier lift would be the hotel, but I think we have a reasonably priced one and that it's less than 150 a night, but I don't know how much less it is. So it's one of the reasons, again, we try to keep the event itself really inexpensive because we know a lot of our rural communities don't have budget for these kind of things. If you do need some kind of assistance, Brian, if you want to reach out, we'll see if there's anything we can do to help you as well.
Yeah, we do have some money, so we just need to know what level of interest there is. So,
and we just need to remember to be fiscally responsible and solvent. So yeah. I just want to keep bringing that up. Thank you. And I've been to Ukiah, absolutely. So I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I'm going to keep moving so I can get through the very specific things that you all asked me to talk about. So one of them was the best approach to up-level knowledge of effective marketing via data-driven social media tools include Size Up, Small Business Intelligence, whether it's Size Up, Blue Dot. So there's a lot of tools and resources out there to figure out, what is the best marketing. But what I wasn't sure of is, were you talking about marketing for tourism to get more people in to just visit the city? Were you talking about attraction, like marketing to get businesses to come there, to get more people there for recreational purposes? So in this space, if I had a recommendation, it would be, again, getting very clear on what the question is, what success looks like. If you had a marketing program, what are the things that it would do? And then as it relates to these different tools that are out there, whether it's Size Up, Blue Dot, or however many other tools that are available, I would create an RFP, and we can certainly have share that RFP that details what type of support you're looking at or looking for. And that way you have multiple proposals to choose from and you can work within your own budget. But again, making sure you're clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish when you say effective marketing, or is it narrowly defined as we're talking about bringing people into our downtown? These are really broad bullet. I don't know if you want to dive into each one of these, Brian, or if your intent was just I talk broadly about some thoughts as it relates to each one of these.
Well, I
What's
think
your
that,
preference?
yeah, this bullet list came from the committee. And so I'm just going to defer to the committee. If you want to get into, specific details, then just let Gearbox know.
So I think part of what was derived from the conference were these are two of the organizations that did presentations as part of the conference, and the Size Up program offered business intelligence for current businesses, new businesses coming in, so they can look at analytics and data on whether or not the business in that industry has particular resources. Do they have websites? Do they have social media, to give analytics to particular business industries to help them make more informed decisions? Now, one of the things, because we're such a small community, about 2,000 individuals, we looked at doing a county level partnership so that the county can participate in the Sized Up platform, because it would cost the same whether the city did it or the county would do it. So we were looking at that and whether or not that would be a beneficial resource, because some of the businesses are struggling. A lot of the businesses are struggling in the community. This would be a resource that they can tap into if we chose to go that direction, even with the county level, to give them some information on how to make decisions that will best benefit their business. One. Secondly, the Blue Dot initiative was something that was really highlighted through Eureka, and something that they utilized to start to build a more robust engagement with the businesses, the retail spaces, that was initiated through the city, that would allow app development with all the businesses on there. And the city bought into buying gift cards or cards that would be utilized specifically for the Blue Dot platform. The businesses can opt into it without any cost, but the cards, which I believe they use were $25 increments, will be given out at public functions to stimulate purchasing things from within the community. So I think the premise behind looking at these two particular offerings was based on the information that was received through the conference and whether or not that would work for our community. We just brought it to the table and we're looking at how that might fit into. Mind you, we still don't have our strategic plan for our redevelopment for the downtown. This is just something that's on the table and we were just trying to get your feedback on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. All right. So that helps narrow it down quite a bit. And I'm really glad to hear you say that, you've got this out there, but you're waiting for the strategy. I'll just put out there that these are great services, but depending upon what your businesses need, and you might have already identified that, so you're very clear on the type of assistance they need. I mean, I'm a fan of buy local incentives for purchasing local, like those gift cards. I think that's really great. And of course, giving intelligence to businesses. I would look at, though, from a fiscally conservative perspective, I'm also a big fan of creating an RFP for what we need. When I say we, like a community would need, or any economic development organization would need, and sharing it broadly. I mean, Size Up and Blue Dot are great tools, but there's a lot of tools out there. So one, in your strategy, being very clear about what is the outcome that you're trying to impact. And if the broad outcome is we want to help our already existing businesses thrive, and then under that we want to make sure they have the intelligence they need to make thoughtful decisions. We want the city to create a buy local type plan or something that encourages people to visit local storefronts. I mean, these are great tools for that. But again, it would be driven from what you're trying to accomplish. I don't know if that helps you.
It does. I would like to also piggyback on what I was saying. This was also driven from an initiative that was brought to us by our county chamber, and they're looking at putting together a county app with an initiative to buy local, and that would be driven with a point system, so they can, you know, plan their visit to whatever city within the county. They would log in to the app, and so we did talk to Blue Dot. They're willing to customize it, but the program from that the chamber was presenting was more robust, and it costs a lot more money.
So
That sounds right.
Just really quick, I just want to make sure that if we include this as part of the plan for any such app, and that is I don't feel it's appropriate to make sure or require that a business is a chamber member to participate in such an app.
I just kind of want to tag team on the conversation. So Gerbox, is it a standard practice in small towns to try to aggregate the data? For instance, we have a lot of people that come in on the weekends. Like if we had a way to use QR codes or whatever on the store, so we could say, hey, if you want to hear about future events or whatever, scan this QR code and start aggregating data across all of our storefronts. Is that like a standard practice? And if that is a practice, is it typically the city or the chamber who would own that technology that would house all that data and then be shared out to the broader businesses to leverage as part of their marketing strategy?
What would the goal be in getting that data? And is it only capturing, this is the person that scanned in here, and so we know that we're getting this many business visits to this location at this time of day? Like, I would ask what specific data you're getting out of that to understand the value of it. I'm not saying, I haven't heard of a place where they're doing it specifically as a way for business support. What we have seen communities do, and this is communities of all sizes, especially smaller communities, because it's very difficult for them to establish a baseline of how many people are coming in. They look for a third party data services. For example, they might be looking at, cell phone tracking, and they use that as a way to figure out how many people are coming into town, how many people are going to certain areas. And there's a lot of different services that do that. I have not heard the notion of scanning it. I mean, that would be certainly something the city could do if that was important to the city and part of your strategic plan. Also, it might be part of your Main Street program and can get funded, whether you have a bid or some other district in the downtown. So it's not necessarily a city function or a chamber function. It's really owned by the businesses themselves that are participating in that district.
Yeah, we have a lot of, I'm just saying it would be great to start aggregating. And if they opt in and it says, hey, do you want to know about future events? Scan QR and we'll keep you updated with future events. The issue is who owns that data, it's like, yeah. So I was just wondering if anyone else is doing that, because these people come to town, we can see how many times they're coming to town, that intelligence, and then we might change our strategy around our tourism offerings, blah, 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 based on what analytics we can get from these QR code scannings. That's kind of where I was thinking. Just wanted to see what other people were doing.
So just a comment on, I think what this conversation indicates is that we are at a point where we're trying to build capacity to address some of these organizational issues that we have. That includes who owns the data, who manages the process, who gets the information, and how is it disseminated, and what does participation look like on a formal basis. So that's where we're at as an organization in terms of our capacity to address and capture some of the resources that are out there. And then the question is, do we have a sort of a dispersed approach where everybody's doing a little bit of something, but then they bring it together and create a strategy from that? Or do we have a more centralized approach in the public sector? I think that what happens in a lot of situations like this is that we then move toward developing a comprehensive strategy where the pieces can be put together that answer some of these questions in a real straightforward way. And that context doesn't exist right now, but that's where we're headed this year, I think, is to create that.
Teresa
That
has a
capacity.
question. Teresa?
Sorry, I didn't want to cut anybody off. I like that question about the QR code and that information. And what I got from the conference was the cell phone tracking was probably the most effective way of finding out who comes into town, where they're coming from, and how long they stay in town. And my question is what I hear is who manages the information. I think that's great information. If we can get that cell phone tracking, we'll find out where people are coming from and who's coming to San Juan. That's all I have to say.
I think too, to piggyback on what you're saying, Teresa, and what Deanna's saying, is that we don't just want to know how many people are coming. We want to be able to remarket to the people that are coming. So how do we capture their data so that we can continue to attract them to whatever it is that we're highlighting for that season or for that month, so that we get actual data outside of the cell phone?
I think also that there
That
are
makes
individual,
sense.
and there are also individual businesses and other communities that will take this on themselves. So I think part of it just depends on what the appetite is for the individual business, that they may take it on themselves. Or maybe the County Chamber of Commerce would be something, because then you can piggyback onto a much larger population base. And we should be looking, as Darlene talks about, not being in silos, we should be looking at the entire county, not just our city. So that's, just my 2 cents there. And one other thing I wanted to bring up is I noticed that Ukiah has a population of 16,000. So we need to put, I've been there several times, we need to put in perspective that we're dealing with 2,000 population here, and we only have 4 blocks basically of businesses. So I just wanted to throw that out so we could maybe focus more on our smallness. And 16,000, maybe that's still considered rural, but we're really tiny.
So I just visited Miranda. I have a client up there, and they have 2,600 people, but they get 1 million visitors. So that's saying a lot to me. So Marin,
where
by Sausalito, sweetheart.
right. Yes, I know. I lived right by there. So it's Marin County, the city of Marin.
Yes.
Fairfax. What is it?
Marin. So the point,
Marin City.
the point that I'm trying to make is, even though you have a small community, you can still attract people and resources to support that small community. They have done they've done a very good job at doing so.
So I'm going to pull back just a little bit because we've gotten really tight into the weeds of a very specific piece. But it's clear that, and I agree with you, Brian, that you do need the broader context and that infrastructure in place of a strategy that says who has this role. And when it comes to who owns the data, it's who's making the investment to collect the data, right? If the city is saying, look, we're going to roll this out, we're collecting this data, this is the way we're going to do it, and the businesses are working with us, it's the city's data to share how they see fit. If you all as a committee say we're going to raise funds and invest it and do it, then I would think it's the committees to own. But it really starts with a broader strategy And again, hopefully that comes out of your Main Street work where it's clear that this is the group that's going to lead on this activity. This is the group that's going to lead on this activity. You don't want to be in place where you're necessarily not all moving in the same direction, or you're replicating pieces, like you're collecting one set of data while maybe the city's getting another, or individual businesses are getting another. And it seemed like even the purposes for collecting this data could be different, whether it's knowing the individual people so you can send them an email, contact them. And that sounds a lot like tourism type support, not just individual support. So hopefully when you start with that strategy, you'll be able to narrow down and clarify who has that role. But we've always seen it to be that whoever's making that investment owns the data piece. Doesn't mean that the committee doesn't have influence and the ability to have a voice in how that data is used. So I'm going to move on to the next item. The need for targeted business attraction. What services will most benefit San Juan Bautista, and what activities will attract visitors? I think you need to do a market study to understand that. As an outsider, it's really difficult for me to tell you that. I would think that the Main Street folks might be able to help you with specific pieces of the downtown. But, you know, Teresa talked a lot about the value of recreation. It could be that you want to do a broader study to understand, you know, what are the assets that you have as it relates to recreation as economic development. It's a really hot topic in a lot of our rural communities. Get a better understanding of, you know, again, who's coming into your community, why are they coming into your community, and that way you can make the business case. You need that data to make the business case to attract the types of businesses that would benefit from what San Juan Bautista has to offer. So my two thoughts there: market study, and make sure again that it's broader than just the downtown, unless your very specific focus is the Main Street area. And then, you know, it makes sense that CAMSA through their work deliver that piece for you. The benefit of enhancements to ambiance, infrastructure, streetscape. And I thought maybe I couldn't tell if you're talking about a maintenance improvement district, a business improvement district, could be the Main Street program. Was that just a general, you guys want to talk about why that was important, or just, you know, make sure everybody's on the same page of understanding the need to make these investments?
I think the context for that is a future plan called the Third Street Master Plan. And the Third Street Master Plan would deal with things like streetscape, would also deal with things like facade improvements, resources to businesses in the downtown, and ways to improve the overall environment from an parking and overall function of the downtown
Garbage collection.
as a space. So
Garbage collection.
Yeah, so obviously it sounds like you are on the same page with these investments are important and they need to happen. So I don't know that I have anything to add there. I just wanted to get clarity on if it was an issue or something that needed additional conversation. Importance of methods of streamlining permit processes. This is a huge issue for jurisdictions when they're working with businesses. And I suspect that, you know, this might have come out of conversations about either city or county or how to get through the permitting process. But you'll find that especially developers, and I suspect those of you that own businesses feel this way too, it is really important that if you're investing resources in your business, you have certainty and clarity of what the process is and the timeline. And so we have, Brian, I'm sure you already have a list of things that you will work on, but we do have a list of top 10 things that jurisdictions do to streamline permit processes. And I'm happy to share that list with you if you'd like.
yes, that'd be great.
Okay, I will send it your way. So I'm going to move on to the next set of stuff that you all had. Funding and capacity resources based on strategic priorities. So this was the point, Hannah, you had made about, you know, resources. It's important to chase mission, not money. I say that a lot at our organization. I say it when I'm talking to nonprofits, but I also say it when I'm talking to groups that are looking at what is the work that we're trying to do. I'm not a fan of chasing money just because there's a resource there. I mean, having that strategic vision of these are the things that we are clear we need to accomplish, and then finding the resources to match. I think that has will serve you well. And my hope is that when you have, whether it's through your strategic plan from the Main Street group, or if it's something that you all work on at the city level, or maybe it's something that you're going to piggyback off from the county level, as you all have talked about, when you're clear on where you need resources and where local government might not be investing those resources or have the ability to, that at that point is where it's like, okay, we have this we're trying to accomplish. What's a resource that can help us with this? Versus we see a lot of communities where it's like, there's money there, let's go get it. And then we can see how it advances our economic development opportunities that we'd like to see happen. So this is a tough one too, you all, because we are seeing the resources weren't the same that they were even 2 years ago. As we get beyond the pandemic, as we get beyond the amount of funding that was pushed out from the state level, you're going to see less and less programs. So you probably will be looking at groups like federal funding from the Economic Development Administration or from USDA Rural Development. Might be a partnership with Ag and Natural Resources Office within the UC system. But again, first figuring out your priorities and then chasing the money. And when you have those priorities, we're certainly happy to help you look around for that opportunity as well.
I think, Ms. Gerbax, one of the problems we're having here with our city is that even though we find funding to align with some of the things that we need or want, the capacity for the city to manage that has been an issue.
Yeah. So that's not uncommon. It's good that you can apply for it, because even bigger than that, there's an issue of applying for those funds, because a lot of smaller communities don't have the capacity to do the grant writing or actually chasing that money. So you don't even get to the point about thinking about how you're going to manage it. Oftentimes, depending on what resource you're chasing, sometimes there's funding available that you can go out to a competitive RFP and have a consultant manage it. And I feel weird talking about this in such a generic context, because without understanding what you're trying to accomplish and the matching funding source to it, I can't get too into the weeds, but I would say that, I would look for opportunities where if you don't have the staff that could manage it, making sure that there's some room for whether it's consultant or some administrative costs that would allow you to have a third-party administrator that helps you with that funding.
I think another thing that we're looking at too is there is a lot of restrictions with the city on what funding can be sought after to get approval for that. And kind of thing that we saw during the conference is there were nonprofits or other organizations, third-party organizations actually going after funding because they have more leverage and a more flexibility in it than with the city.
So when you say that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what would be a constraint that for the city, like you'd said that the city can't necessarily go after funding. Is it because of a process issue or an issue of applying for funds? Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
So there's lots of funding pools that the city itself, there's a grant writer on that was contracted to the city that when they identify grants, they go after. But if there's certain resources like we have, for instance, Teresa, looking for funding, if she wanted to get funding for a particular project, we couldn't go through the city to do it because it's a capacity thing, I believe. They have a plan and a strategy to the things that they're going to write for specifically. And so if we identify something that aligns with something that we want to produce in the city, it may not necessarily match with what the city has on their agenda and the capacity for their staff to manage it.
Yeah, I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, as a committee, you all are not a formal organization. So you as an organization can't apply for funding. It would be the city or perhaps a nonprofit that was working in that space in San Juan Bautista that could apply. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it's sort of a multi-level problem. We do have a grant writer. We have to pay the grant writer to write grants for us. If we don't get the grant, as we've experienced, then it's kind of a sinkhole in terms of, because a lot of these grants are competitive. The other thing is that we would be writing a grant in the wind, if you will, without a strategy and without a system of prioritizing what programs we really want to spend time. For example, we like active transportation and transportation planning, and we put a lot of effort into getting grants for transportation planning because we feel it's extremely important for the town, because it's one leg of a successful economic development program. But we know this without having a strategy, so we invest a lot in going after those funds. But I think that's the problem, is that we need a strategy upon which we will base our effort. And then, because all of these grants require management, they all require us holding the hand of our grant writer as they write the grant, and that's a big time constraint for us. So we have a capacity issue again. So I think that's the key. And we have a strategy.
It does sound like
Missing a strategy.
Yeah, it does sound like that strategy piece is so critical, and you guys are so close. And I certainly hear from the committee side, the committee member side, that you guys are ready to go. And so you're ready to go, but you need that strategy probably to kind of align resources and then go chase more resources. I will say, for those of you that if you do attend the rural exchange, meet the funders. There's going to be up 3 or 4 different funders that'll be there. Take the time to talk to them and introduce yourself and talk about, the things that you all are working on, whether it's EDA, USDA. I think we have a few state folks there. And you will have time. We specifically structure it in a way that you can meet other people. So if nothing else, you can at least find out what funding is out there from those sources. They might even be able to tell you groups that they have funded that could support your efforts, where you don't have to write a grant, like you had mentioned, other nonprofits that have the capacity to get these bigger grants. There is one, the International Economic Development Council, IEDC, has a really large grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to hire and train economic development fellows and place them in underserved communities. And currently they were looking for fellows. And I think the next place, if they haven't started already, and they might have, they're looking for communities that would like a fellow. That is highly competitive. If you can get one of those fellows or mid-level economic development staff, and I think it would have to go to the city, Brian, it couldn't necessarily be a staff to a committee, but that's one place to look, maybe to see if you can increase your capacity. Again, very competitive, because I believe they only have, I thought they had said they had 60 to 75, and there's no guarantee that every state will even get a fellow. So something worth looking into in case it helps you all. And that kind of ties into this next one about the capacity for ongoing economic development is important. I absolutely agree with you. I'm not sure, and I'd be interested in hearing, the committee's role in this. Staffing and business incubation are key. Is this just, the committee understands this and has an awareness of it, and they want to see the investments from the city? Or is there something else you had in mind in sharing this point?
Maybe I can prime the conversation a little bit. The current arrangement that we have with respect to this committee is established by the city council, and I think that it works both ways, and I think this committee is ready to start going there. That is, the city council did establish the committee under certain constraints. And I think the committee now is at a point where they can then recommend back to the city council changes in the way the committee conducts this exercise. And that may have an effect on our capacity to do more economic development. But Also, our staff has many hats, and economic development is just one. So I think that goes to the heart of this, both of those things.
So currently, right now, the way our committee is set up, we can't actually facilitate any tasks or and there's no action related to what we do. We are in a capacity of advisory. So we look at things that might be affecting from business perspective or from community perspective and things of that nature. And then we compile a report and submit it as a recommendation to the city council but because there's not a lot of staff, who's going to act on it? So we're hoping that we can move to where we can at least establish a task force that would allow, some action to be generated through the process that we're putting so much time and energy into.
And what does it look like in other communities? That's
So, oh, sorry, Brian, I was going to say it looks different depending upon what the goals of the jurisdiction and the electeds are that have put the committee together. In some cases, they only want a think tank, a committee that's, sharing ideas or giving recommendations. Sometimes it's more engagement in that they want the city or the committee members to be the actual kind of face of economic development with the businesses, talking to businesses, maybe doing business visitation, making sure they understand how important they are. I haven't seen a lot of communities where the committee itself is doing implementation. Now, seeing that you guys are going through an iterative process here, right? You were formed, you've got your first year or so under your belt. There's things that you want to do. Again, I really get the sense that committee members are ready to go, roll up your sleeves, do more than you've already done, but you don't have that strategy yet to help create the focus and delineate who has what roles. So I just think this is going to be an iterative process, and it's hard to be patient when you see things happening in the community that you want to address right away. So I don't know if that helps you all, but it is really specific to what's happening in your own community. I can't tell you the right way to do it, but I can tell you going through this thoughtful process, even though it probably feels slow on your end, again, while you're living it and there's things that you really want to see change, being strategic is critical, and making sure that you are aligning your resources where you can make a difference and going to that final piece of what does success look like for the committee. And that might change based on what iteration of the committee and where you are in this timeline of having a strategy and then possibly doing implementation, or maybe the city has the ability to do some of the implementation. One thing we saw in a county, and Teresa, I see you have your hand up, so I'm going to talk really quickly and I'll turn it over to you. We have a county where they had one economic developer and she wore multiple hats. They had hired a consultant to do a big economic development strategy that hit so many areas. There's no way she would have been able to deliver on all those. And what they ended up doing, it wasn't a task force. I believe they called it a committee as well. They made a list of who's on their team that could impact each of those areas. They were clear on what the goals were in each area. They were clear on who was assigned to it. It wasn't always the county. It wasn't the city. It wasn't always the committee. It was a specific group. So if you had tourism outcomes, there was a tourism group that was working on it, and they met regularly to make sure that entire plan was moving forward. Critical for you all will be what is your piece of the plan that you're moving forward, and what can you implement versus what are other people implementing or other groups implementing. The economic development at this level is a team effort. It can't just be one person at the city or two people at the city doing that work. Sorry, Teresa, go ahead. Saw your hand up.
Oh, no problem. You had mentioned the impatience. And I think there's so many in our group that are action oriented. And so the impatience is where we have to bring ourselves back and realize that we are a committee and a group. So When you hit that word, I said, "Oh my God, I'm so not used to, waiting for things to happen."
Yeah, I know. We hear a lot, and I'm sure Brian, you've heard this too. We hear people talk about government, and government needs to move at the speed of business, right? I'm sure we've all heard that statement in the past. And as many of you are business owners or engaged in the business community, you might be on a much faster track or have a different expectation of how quickly and how deeply you can engage in each of these areas that you feel so passionately about. You'll get there. It doesn't sound like it'll be as quick as you'd like, but having that strategy and doing that work up front will really pay off as you guys start looking at where you can put your resources and energy. And Teresa, I'm not sure if you raised your hand again or if it's still up
No,
from the last comment.
Oh, sorry. No.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move on to these next two items. I know we're close on time, and I want to be mindful that we don't run over. So, small, historic, and rural does not have to mean insular. Is it possible to change your mindset of folks who want the city in a bubble? So I'm going to answer this in response to, and I heard this in our opening comments as you all were talking about the next generation of folks, making sure there's opportunity. I shared with you that I used to work at the Rural Health Association. One of the biggest challenges that we saw is that you couldn't attract doctors and healthcare professionals to some of the smaller communities because there wasn't anything for their spouse, or there weren't the amenities they wanted for their family or their kids. We see it even at the level of, we had an event just prior to the pandemic in the North State, and we were talking about what was happening in these specific counties. I mean, they were talking about how they couldn't get dentists as quickly and how long it took to get an appointment to get their car worked on, how they couldn't get a plumber out because there just wasn't the volume of that kind of service professional or business there in the community. But the challenge was the community didn't have the amenities to make them want to be there. Not that it wasn't a nice place to live, but there were other pieces of that. So one thing that I always talk to smaller communities about is you can protect the core of your values. You can celebrate who you are and not feel like you're selling out or changing too much, but you have to look to also the future of what you want for the next generation. What is your community going to look like in 5 or 10 years? If your vision for the community in 5 or 10 years is static, you want it to look exactly like it is right now, more likely than not, it's not going to end up that way. It'll probably be either less viable and not thrive because the investments haven't been made necessarily to keep moving forward. And I don't know how you candidly have that conversation with folks that have perhaps been there for generations, or they're really clear that I moved here because I like the community the way it is. Not, I don't want to see the community grow or change. But we all are challenged to look at what we want the future to be like for the next generation, whether you have kids or not. If you want a viable community, you have to look at the future. And for most communities, that means investing, and it might not mean growing, but it might mean changing in order to meet what's happening in the environment. I think it's really difficult to thrive without change. I don't know if that happens as part of a community engagement process for you all, or you've already done that kind of work. But if you have specific folks that are just, perhaps they're leaders that have said, I don't want any change in the community, that's a local conversation that has to be led by the community and local leaders. So I don't know how to help you in that space other than to say, it's not about what the community looks like now. It's what you want for the future. It's what you want for the next generation. Oftentimes just talking about in that context breaks loose some of that conversation, so you can talk about what are the pieces we want to celebrate and save, and where can we invest and change. Does that get at what you were hoping to talk about? And just so you know, this comes up not just in small rural communities, it comes up in a lot of communities, urban included, where you have some leaders that are like, I like our city the way it is, or I like our county the way it is. I don't want it to change.
I think you brought up some very interesting points that we need to kind of fan out, because we have to look at what we want the next generation to value, and make sure that we're putting in the footwork now, the legwork now, and so we can build on something. So thank you for that.
I would just like to echo that our community has been stagnant for several years. And we do need to change it, and we need to get some of our vacant buildings occupied. We had a thriving restaurant community here, and it's gone. We still have a few restaurants, especially good restaurants like Anaka and Smoke Point, and then Hardeen's, which really draws a lot of people, and Doña Esther's, and then there's JJ's, and now we have a new Mission Cafe, Gigi's, and then Lola that does sandwiches. So we're building on that, but we need more. There were people that lived in Gilroy, or I ran into a man that lived in Santa Cruz, and they would come to San Juan for dinner. And we don't have that now. So we need to do that. We had a bakery that was very, very, very popular. I think Teresa mentioned she was up on the ski slopes, the Squaw Valley, and some guy asked her where she was from, and she told him, and he's like, oh my God, we love that bakery. I've had people from Monterey tell me that. Of course, that was back in the 70s. We did have one that was viable up until about 15 years ago. But other than that, we have a bakery now, and it's been closed for I don't know how long. 2 months. So those are things that we can handle right now. They're hitting us over the head, in my opinion. So I just wanted to bring that up. And also, we have an issue with dumpsters at some of the businesses that we have. Property owners won't allow access, and so we have landlocked properties that have these big dumpsters out on the streets. And I've got to tell you, that is not attractive. And you walk by it to go to the restaurant. So we have that, and we have parking. So we have so many things that are just right in front of us that we can address and move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and you might have, yeah, absolutely. And you might have already done this, and I suspect, Brian, you might have a list of this anyhow, but you might have a short list of things that look outside of a strategy. Here are 10 things that are issues that we feel like we could move forward on. Like the dumpster thing, I'll tell you, we've heard that in the downtown a lot. We've heard it in business improvement districts. There was one community, well, a couple of districts that have done this, where they painted the dumpsters to make an artwork across and made it a community project, because there wasn't anywhere to put those dumpsters, but they wanted it to at least look not like an eyesore. So I think you have some options, but making a list maybe of things that feel very immediate to you, and then discussing if there's things that are easy fixes that you can work on that can make a difference. Again, knowing what you want it to look like, knowing what you want success to look like from the committee and the city standpoint. Okay, the final one, the scope of
I do want to say that it's a new evolution of where this committee needs to be, because even though we can make a list of 10 things that can be actionable, because our hands are tied, we're just here as advisors. So we have to look at whether or not these are things that we can actually do. And I believe that Fran had something to say as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that we're always talking about all these strategic things and things that we want to do that require money and grants and being patient for the plan. But in the meantime, there's so much that we should be doing now. And so that's kind of where my focus has always been while I'm here, because I understand that certain things take time. And I also question whether we have all the right people in place to do those things right now. But, for example, I'll give you an example. So I was in San Francisco, and I started talking to one of the general managers of a hotel in San Francisco. She noticed my van. Oh, you're San Juan Bautista. I said, yes. Oh, I love San Juan Bautista. I've been a visitor for many years. I loved it so much that I took all of my management team, my regional management team, to San Juan Bautista to visit, and they loved it as well. And so, as I left that car, and of course I told her, come back to San Juan Bautista, we miss you. right? But it's again, it's just us thinking outside of the box of things we can immediately do now. And that is, we can invite, regional general managers from hotels to bring their management staff here and do a tour for them once a month or something, to introduce San Juan Bautista to them, so that way they can talk to their guests that are nearby or whatnot. But there's a lot of those things that take action and being out there and doing something. This side of it, although I am part of it, isn't my favorite because it takes time and there's a lot of politics involved that sometimes you can't get past, and it ends up being a waste of my 2 hours. But there's definitely a lot that we can do as a group, and I hope that we can start focusing on those things as well. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Again, I get it. There's things that you see immediately that you want to be able to address, and your mission is such, your charge is such that you are advisors, so you're not charged to implement. And I think, as you look at the next iteration of what the committee does, that's a conversation you guys have with the city. Or maybe it is, you form a nonprofit and you say, these are the things we want to do, we're going to do, whether the city funds them or not. But I suspect more likely you'll be working in partnership with the city, figuring out where you can engage. It's a difficult spot to be in when you see things like that and you're really excited about change. And like you said, it does take time, especially when you're going through a process like this. But hopefully that process also narrows down where you guys can be effective. Because if you have a long list of things that you want to do right now, how do you figure out, how are you prioritizing what you're going to move forward on? As a committee, you guys can't be everything to everyone, and you certainly don't want to burn out because you're focusing on too many things. So some strategic work just amongst the committee itself might be valuable in figuring out, this is the real capacity that we have as a committee, if it is that you want to implement, and have that conversation with Brian. And I certainly don't want to speak for Brian because that's a relationship you all have to manage locally. But you have a lot of opportunity. You have, again, the charts that I saw in the documents that was shared is very broad, but I didn't see an implementation piece in there. I certainly understand why you feel passionately about wanting to implement, though. So and then I hit this last point real quick because we have 9 minutes left. And again, I want to be really mindful of your time. The scope of economic development relationships must be internally holistic, so knowing the groups that are internal, and extended strategically beyond San Juan Bautista. I said it earlier, you're absolutely right. It takes a team, knowing who else is working on economic development. And some of that comes from having connections outside San Juan Bautista, like knowing what your colleagues in other communities are doing. So those are the points we'll ask to address. Again, my slide deck has a lot more content on it than I know we had time to cover, because I'm going to share it with you and you can look at it at your own leisure. I'm just going to quickly go through what's in the remaining slides so you know what's in the deck that I'll share with you after. Here, talk about a list of what are common things that cities in particular do to support economic development. Brian, you'd asked what we see when it from other committees. This is what we see from other cities when they're looking at economic development. These are some of the top activities that jurisdictions are working on to advance economic development. So that'll be in the deck. Projects and transactions from the city and county side, what they're doing as it relates to site assembly, funding projects, physical real estate infrastructure projects. This is a list of some of those tools and what that looks like. How you support the 3 forms of economic development: retaining and expanding business, creating business. I saw business incubation as one of the things that you guys were interested in. So there's some content in here about that, and attraction of new business. So again, strategies on how to support those types of efforts. I will share, I saw this in a small community and I thought it was really interesting. I don't want to share which community it is because I didn't get their permission to do that. They were looking at ways to support their small businesses that were manufacturing things locally. Like maybe they were making them in their house, or maybe they had a small shop or something like that. And the city had a public space, and what they did is they set it aside and they said, look, for local manufacturers, you can put your products here at no charge. and you can sell them through this space. And it was really, I know they're doing a lot more of that online these days because of the pandemic, but it was a great way to support your local manufacturers, helping them and also helping folks get awareness of what types of products are being manufactured locally. Again, they started that right at the start of the pandemic, so I think it was a challenge, but it's a really good idea. There's also another community that, and we see this a lot more and more now, the selfie spots, creating opportunities where people will come to your community to take pictures. Interestingly, there was a very small community again whose claim to fame was their cannabis industry. So their intent was to have the largest cannabis leaf that they could have on one of their major thoroughfares, so people would come in and take selfies with it. It seems, I know it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it does drive traffic. So some of the ways people are looking at supporting businesses is attraction of new business. This is information that I talked to one of our members about, retail strategies in particular. None of this is so complex that as you're going through it yourself, you won't understand what it means. But they are things that when you're looking at your Main Street strategy in particular, good questions to understand. Like if we're attracting businesses to our Main Street, you know, what types of businesses are going to be interested in being here? And can we make the business case for them to be here? Again, you heard me say that we hear a lot this focus on, I need to get a Trader Joe's in my community. We have to have the business case to have Trader Joe's in your community, the demographics, the other requirements they have to be there. So that's in here. Focus and close on just the notion that you guys are unique. I say this to every community because it's so easy to look at either your neighboring community or look at a community of a similar size and say, well, they have that and we should have that. But you guys are unique. I mean, every community has its unique assets, its unique competitive advantages and disadvantages as well. So it's really important that you understand that as part of your strategy process and that you're clear on, again, on what success looks like. You guys are limited in your resources, limited in your capacity, and that's true for probably every jurisdiction and every economic development organization that we speak to, because there's not unlimited funding for economic development. So knowing the specific metrics, detailed pieces that you want to move forward, and then be able to work back from that because you've strategically gotten there is just absolutely important in helping you make sure that you deliver the change that you want to see or the impact that you want to see in your community. So Brian, I'm going to share these with you. I did have a couple of slides that talk about where to begin. Do you want me to go into these? Again, being mindful of time, I don't want to be disrespectful of the fact that you've already committed 2 hours to this.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think there's a consensus that everybody wants you to go through them.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this is the piece, Helena, we had talked about, you know, what next? What next is a committee? So oftentimes when I'm talking to volunteer leaders, newly electeds in particular, I talk to them about, you've come in here, you've got a head full of steam, there's a lot you want to accomplish. You need to make sure you know what's already there to help you. So understanding, do you already have a plan, a strategy, an element, resolutions, initiatives? You all have a lot going on in the county. You have the work that's being done on SURF through the EDC. You have the SEDS that's happened. You're looking more locally at what are the things that you want to achieve as well. Understanding that, you know, those pieces don't necessarily have to be complementary to each other, but they might have the same foundation in terms of the data sets. And because of that, they might be more aligned than you think. And there's ways that you can move your agendas together at the city, county, regional level. But knowing what's out there, if for no other reason to see, you know, is there a way for you to piggyback and move your agenda forward along with these others and maybe get more of an impact because you all are working on it? So what do you already have? Understanding that, who is on your team? So we keep saying that it's a team sport, whether it's the staff, the county, EDC, chamber, business council, state and national groups. Again, I think you have an advisory group at the county. You also have you have county staff that are doing this. I think, is it Hollister? They have economic development team as well. So knowing who's on your team isn't just the economic development folks that are on your team. There could be groups that are working in your community. For example, the Workforce Development Board, maybe the small business development centers, but knowing who is already working in your space will help you in terms of, you heard me talk about the county that didn't have the ability to move forward their entire strategic plan. They knew who was on their team, and they knew who could be responsible for moving different pieces of that strategy forward. Understanding what industries are already thriving, even in a small community. This is important. Knowing the data pieces of, you might think, you know, we have such a big retail base, that's what we're about. I can't tell you how many times I've had communities make a general statement like that, but then when you go back and look at the data, whether it's you pull it from Esri or you go to one of your partner organizations that might already have it, being armed with that data is critical, because it might not match what you see actually happening in your space. You might see the retail, the restaurants locally, but maybe you have a thriving home-based business community that you're not aware of, or that you don't necessarily see because they don't have spaces within your physical business district. So what industries are already thriving, and what industries and retails can you support? That was the piece about making sure you've done the market study, or making sure you understand what your business case is. What are you going to say to a business that you want to attract, aside from the fact that this is a great place to raise your kids, it's a beautiful community, people are engaged. I mean, I'm sure you can imagine that the majority of communities that are doing business attraction talk about the quality of life in their community. So what sets you apart beyond quality of life as your business case that will help industries that can thrive? And this is more of we talked a lot about revenue and capacity. Where does your revenue come from? Understanding that. The conversation that I've had, and it was interesting, I had spoken to a small community about their revenue base, and they had talked a lot about how much manufacturing they had. And when we actually looked at their revenue, their largest revenue generators, it was a gas station that far exceeded the next business closest to it. So really understanding what are the drivers in your community that are bringing in revenue to give you ability to further invest in economic development, because maybe there's a trend in there that you can piggyback on and support and somehow otherwise benefit from. Asking the right.
Can I ask you a
Oh,
question
go ahead.
right there? Yeah. So
Of course.
we're a very small town, as mentioned earlier. I think also part of the planning is understanding, if we don't have a ton of space due to our city limits, it's going to preclude us from certain business capabilities. So I think that all has to be factored in and understood as we talk about our strategy, because a lot of things on your slides today are going to be difficult for us to execute against because of the land challenges. So if we focus on tourism and retail, obviously, Gerbucks, as the economy ebbs and flows, we are going to feel it dramatically because our revenue is tied to those two income streams. So I think we need to be cognizant of that, right? As we build our strategy, understanding the deltas that come along with having maybe two key income revenue streams, tourism and retail, right?
No, that's a great point. The other piece to that I would say is the value in having that data and knowing what your disadvantage is. This piece that you really don't have a lot of land where you can bring in physical businesses, but knowing what other businesses might be thriving, whether you have a huge quantity of those businesses or not, seeing if you can help businesses in that same space so you can diversify your revenue streams. We saw this during the pandemic, and it happened a lot. I'll tell you, it was a lot on the coastal communities we're dealing with, where the heavy focus was, it was either tourism or it was the retail and restaurant that supported the tourism. that were the primary drivers. And I'll tell you, the consistent thing we heard from them is we're looking at what are the second and third tier industries or businesses that are thriving and seeing if we can create some balance in our economy. That's a very strategic thing to do. And you're absolutely right, paying attention to the fact that you're heavily reliant on those key pieces and you have a serious constraint there. And then having a conversation about where's the opportunity for us. I would hope that in your strategy, you guys are doing a SWOT analysis. I mean, that's common in any strategy, right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But looking at it from that perspective and understanding that, yeah, you know, we're really relying on these two industries. What else can we help? What can we do to create some balance and sustainability so we're not going to be at the mercy of just whatever happens in the economy that impacts these two? So excellent point. Thank you for bringing it up. Asking the right budget questions. Are you cutting revenue generators? You know, I share this and I leave it in here for volunteer groups and electeds alike. You know, oftentimes when cities and counties and government in general, when you're going through a difficult time, we hear statements like, well, we're just going to do 10% budget cuts across every department, or everybody has to take a hit. This is your share. One thing that we talk about with economic development is that while, you know, the conversation around budgets is usually about how do we divvy up the pie or where do we make cuts? But what it should also be about is where's our revenue coming from? And shouldn't we be investing in economic development so that we have more revenue to increase the pie, not just cut it up the way we do? So we spend a lot of time talking about, you know, strategy of looking at the budget and the investments you're making and the cuts you're making as well. I mean, obviously, I believe you guys understand the value of economic development. Otherwise, you wouldn't be committing so much time and energy to being part of the committee and having this conversation as well. And the final piece, are your timelines realistic? I share that. We've talked a lot about, you know, the speed of which work gets done in this space. And sometimes it's slow and sometimes it's fast. But it's important that you all have managed that and understand it. More often than not, when I'm having this conversation, we've seen direction to staff that, you know, we want this store at this time, or we want this business district to be thriving by the end of the year. And it's an almost impossible task to meet. From your perspective, I mean, I don't necessarily know that that's the case. The bigger issue for you all to work through is, as you're going through this iterative process of what the committee is and what you're able to do and how that changes over time, you know, what's realistic in terms of the relationship with the city? You know, what does this city expect from the committee? What do the electeds expect from the committee? And what do you all want to do? And how do you come to balance in that conversation? So you are being realistic and candid about what you can do and the timeline within which it happens. So critical pieces, it's a very critical piece in setting the expectation and making sure that you all don't get frustrated as well as you're making investments into supporting economic development there. And that would be the final piece of my slide deck. So I will share this with Brian. He can share it with you. Brian, I'll send you the list I'd mentioned of permitting, streamlining best practices in order to help you as well. But again, I suspect that you've seen it before and you probably know a lot of these. How else can I support you guys? Like, what else is there? Is there something we didn't talk about that you were hoping we talked about, or?
I think you gave us a lot.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, you guys have a lot on your plate. Yeah.
I think we just need to kind of take it in and maybe revisit this recording so that we can kind of make some informed decisions. Our strategy is going to be derived through the Main Street program. So we have a lot to kind of consider prioritizing and seeing how it's all going to fan out with the strategy, and knowing that, you know, this is a slow pace kind of scenario. We have to put the plan together and figure out what the next generation of this group is going to look like, and what the capacities are of this particular committee, and what our strategic plan and the revitalization of our down street is gonna look like, and how to maybe prioritize it based upon the information that we've received from you tonight and what we've received through the workshop.
Mhm.
Well, you all have a lot on your plate. So sorry, Fran, were you going to say something? Go for it.
I was just adding to Helena and also considering and looking at what we have here today because it's very unique. So it's not going to be as easy as we might think.
Well, it is a big charge you have. And I can tell, even though the charge is big, there's more that you all want to do beyond that. So if there's anything we can do to help you, certainly reach out. And I'll look for some of you at the Rural Exchange too. And Teresa, I see you have your hand up.
I'm just gonna say one quick question. Everybody keeps talking about Trader Joe's. Is it that great?
Yes, I love Trader Joe's.
I know, but
Is it?
you know, every economic development committee meeting that we were involved in, they kept talking about Trader Joe's.
Teresa, I will
Cities
tell
really,
you.
do cities really need Trader
Well,
Joe's?
Well, let me tell you this, Teresa, it's a really good point that you bring up Trader Joe's. So I've been living here for 22 years. And so when I first went to the Windmill Market, they were our Trader Joe's, but they weren't getting the support. You know, they had a Cowgirl Creamery there. They had a meat market, butcher, like all those things. And so if you're not supporting these businesses that are trying to create things that you think you need to drive to San Jose to get, then shame on you.
Agreed.
And Windmill's
Exactly.
starting to pick up the pace again, so that's pretty exciting. They
Yeah.
do have Cypress Grove there now. One, but they do.
Thanks, Fran.
And down,
Well,
Teresa.
awesome.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was fabulous.
Oh, thanks, you guys. Thanks for inviting me and letting me be part of it. But again, you know, we're here to support you however we can. Reach out. Oftentimes that support will be as connecting you with other people that are closer to the work. But you have an exciting opportunity, but it is a lot of work. It's glad to see your excitement and enthusiasm for it too. I think Teresa did.
Teresa, do you have a question, comment?
I lowered my hand.
Okay. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak up? Leslie, Mayor Jordan?
Did you unmute her?
Did you unmute her?
I'm unmuted. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. I just want to, I have so many more questions. It was a phenomenal presentation. I appreciate everything that you said and went through based on our questions and concerns and who we are. We don't get that a lot. So I appreciate everything you have presented, but it opens up a plethora of questions for me. So I'm looking forward to talking to you directly.
Yeah, reach out. I'll make sure my contact information's on the last slide, but you guys have it as well from the email exchanges. Please reach out. Don't be shy about it at all.
Thank you.
Thank you
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. I will hang up because I know you might have other business to discuss, but thank you for including me and nice meeting you all for those
Thank
folks that I
you.
haven't met before.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Leslie, do you have a question?
I do not. I thought I lowered my hand. Sorry.
Oh,
Oops, there we
that's
go.
okay. And then we have one more item on the agenda, member attendance at conference or trainings.
So Gearbox mentioned some training seminars and so forth, and there's a lot out there. And I just want to let you know that you do have a budget. We haven't spent it all yet, but it is there. It's enough to send people to conferences and training. So let me know if you're interested, and then we can see what's possible. That's all I'd like to say. I think the Ukiah thing is doable. It's a 3.5-hour drive, and probably longer. You'd have to go through the Bay Area, but it sounded pretty good to me. And there's also something that I sent out that Renee Wells sent us regarding training. There's a seminar in Monterey. And yeah, so everybody should have received that. That's local, and I think it's free, isn't it? Yeah, so yeah, do take advantage and let me know. That's all.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Oh, I'm sorry, Rhonda. I'm sorry.
Hi, Rhonda. Inaka Japanese restaurant, and I also have a small bookkeeping business in town. A few things just came to my mind. It's not really, I guess somehow it will relate back to her presentation she gave. But the last 2 meetings I've been to, there's a lot of talk about comparing to a small town similar to San Juan, which in a sense I've been reading up, and we're like a village actually, because we're under 2,500 people. And maybe for the committee, and I'm here to listen and to maybe help or whatever, but for the town, focus on working on getting businesses here that people want to come to town for. I have been with a few business owners in town to a town called Murphy's. And if you guys ever get a chance, go there. If San Juan could be Murphy's, I would be in absolute heaven. There, I mean, everywhere you stop, every crevice you walk through, there's a brewery, a winery, a shop that has amazing retail. You want to go in every spot, and a lot of the spots are closed, and I want to go back because we want to go on a Monday and to be able to go to these stores that are closed. So if you guys get a chance, I would recommend that. Also for you guys to work on, or the city, I don't know how this all comes together. All of this is kind of new to me. Kind of just joined a lot of different things recently. Work on filling a lot of the vacancies in town, because we have pretty much a ghost town, even though on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays, it's pretty good. And different businesses, like she was talking about, that balance our community, not just focusing on retail and restaurant. Can't come up with an idea of some, but just different businesses in town, so we attract more people, different ages of people. And the businesses that are in town, and I can speak for my own, want to build your business here for people to come here, not just bitch and moan that nobody's coming to town. Where's the walking traffic? It's here. You have to have things that they want to come for. And I'm not here to toot our horn, because I didn't do this. My mother-in-law did this, and my father-in-law. They've had a restaurant since they're 19 years old. They have built their business. People come to us from Fresno, Monterey, Marina, San Jose, Tahoe. They come for the restaurant, for the food, the taste, also to see my in-laws. But you want to build your business, and I've been with this family for 30 plus years, just learning this. You want to build your business so people want to come. Other than that, I had a question. There's been a lot of talk about San Juan back in its viable days, which I get. I've been here 20 years. I don't know that I was that involved in town. We didn't have the restaurant then, so I don't know if I realized that, and I was younger, so don't know what that really meant. But one question that keeps coming up in my mind, and I keep hearing, is that we are viable and we can get back to that. And then I heard tonight that
we were once viable, and when we were viable, I would imagine we didn't have the city staff that we have now.
That's
Right?
correct. And we had a lot of volunteers and we
Right.
had people.
And they had it going on.
They had it
Now
going
we
on,
have,
and we worked together.
right, and we have something that could be viable.
Yep.
We have a lot more city staff since I've
Yeah.
lived here. Now, why is it I'm hearing that it can't get done?
Right.
So if you have more bodies.
Yep.
There should be more work getting done.
Yeah, and I think that the word on the street is that San Juan's not business friendly, and we need to get over that.
Mhm, mhm. I
Like,
have
you
heard
know, I've
that.
heard that.
I haven't heard
more
that for
than
myself.
one
I've
place.
heard that from
Yeah,
the people that work in our restaurant.
yeah, so we
Yeah.
really need to
Yes.
do that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Rhonda.
Good questions. Thank you.
Okay, so the next regular meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, September 13th. And it is 8:19 p.m. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just quickly, I'm on the ad hoc and I'm the representative from the outreach committee. And I've already pulled one of my people. I've got something, I'm working on the big job fair and I've just been working so much. So I hate to do this because I know I just said, yes, it'll work. But I'm gonna ask my other committee member that's out there, Mayor Jordan. Are you available to take my spot on Friday? Did she leave?
No,
I've
I'm
already
still here.
discussed with Fran, so she can't. So are you available?
Yes, I will be available. Thank you.
The formal establishment of the ad hoc committee, we'll have to recognize that as part of the agenda on the 13th. That's just a formality, so.
So
No reason the ad hoc committee
Well, but
can't
the
have,
meeting's on Friday.
no reason the ad hoc committee can't have people who are not, appointed to the ad hoc committee attend those meetings, so.
The 13th is going to be a problem if we're going to Ukiah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we need to be there on the
That's September.
13th to be at the meetings on the
No.
14th.
September 14th.
Yeah, that's when it
Okay.
is.
That's for the rural
And you'll have to
exchange.
probably spend the night because it's a hike up there.
We need 6 members to be a quorum, so that's something to take into account.
Quick question, off topic, sorry, but when does mainstream start? And what is the estimated time for having our strategy workable? When does California Mainstream start? Mainstream, Main Street, and then is it a 6-week? process?
Okay.
Like, what is the timeline for that?
Yeah, so we have a city council approval for contract with California Main Street. We're members of California Main Street, but we haven't programmed in the time frame for them pending, this discussion, basically, so we can see how everything fits together. But there's no reason that we can't begin if that's the appropriate approach to develop strategy. First thing is to do some public engagement, community engagement. That's what the Main Street contract is all about. So, that is a, multi-month process. So probably 6 to 9 months. Yeah. But it's fully budgeted. And that is the next step.
Thank you for that. And then following up on what Stephanie said, there's real estate for sale downtown. There's gaps downtown. Like, is there anything we could do right now to start working on a strategy for that on this committee? Or like, how do we kickstart that conversation?
I think there is, but I don't know. Because we're a Brown Act committee. I'm not sure how we do this. I don't know how we go about it, but I do believe that.
Well, there is the problem. The city council needs to have ordinances for vacancies and a process that you do in order to approach these owners.
And that was recommended to them in our.
Yes, and it's been recommended for 6 years.
So what I would do is put this on your September 13th agenda. That would be appropriate. There really isn't anything else on the agenda except the presentation tonight, so we can't get into you know, some of those, but we can
Yeah,
get more specifics on Main Street. We're looking forward to having an ad hoc committee presentation, review of what that your committee's been talking about. And that will be on the September 13th agenda also.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna put this out in the universe. We all have a lot of friends in different towns. It'd be great if we could find someone from a nearby town that has had to deal with this exact problem and see how they managed through it with the city, with all the business partnerships. I would just encourage us, let's go out there and try to see if we can find someone that we could bring in to help us.
Okay, these things are not on the agenda for conversation, so we need to.
My
Sorry,
apologies.
I'm sorry. That's okay. It's appropriate for the committee. So let's talk about that on the 13th. And then if you want to add some things to the agenda, get a hold of me, send me an email, and I'll put it on the agenda. Okay.
So I know 2 people for sure, possibly 3, won't be there on the 13th. So we're supposed to do something for the ad hoc to present. How is that gonna work? Or is it gonna be an approved dismissal because we're going to be?
Well, let's think about scheduling a meeting the week after, perhaps.
Yeah.
Instead of the 13th, we might reschedule that for a week later. So let's just see. I'll make sure that we have take a poll and see who's going to be around, and we'll make a decision accordingly.
Also, you can participate in Zoom if it's a conference that's related to the committee.
That's a good point.
It would be because.
Yes, it would. Yeah. Yeah. So not an issue, right?
Not an issue.
Okay.
Didn't hear any of that conversation.
The conversation is all about the September 13th meeting, and some people might want to go to the Ukiah conference. So that would make it possible for people to participate remotely because it's related to the committee's business. And I didn't think that. Thanks, Liz. So that's possible.
Teresa,
And again, we have a limited agenda this evening.
Teresa,
Yes.
your hand's up.
Oh, shoot, no, lower my hand.
Can I get a motion to
I'm-
adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
All in favor?
8:26 PM and the
You don't tell me you want to go, fine, you have to do it.